you've been on holiday, whether you've been on a staycation. We've been hoping for decent weather and we haven't really had it. But it's been a time of holiday, hasn't it? Kind of July, August is a chilled out time. The kids are off. Maybe work slows down for some. And September, we kind of get back into the swing of it, don't we? The kids certainly go back to school. People are back from holiday. And it is an opportunity for new beginnings. Maybe like me, your child is starting secondary school. And maybe like me, you're more nervous than they are. Because she's been ready for years, but I am still not ready. So I don't know how I'm going to be tomorrow morning. Please pray for me, never mind her. She's much more savvy and confident and capable than I was at 11. And indeed, than I am now, really. Bless her. She's absolutely brilliant. So we had a little practice walk to the bus stop the other day. And because I'm a mum and because of, how it is, I say to her now, what are you going to do if a car pulls up and offers you a lift? What will you do? What will you do? What will you do? And she rolls her eyes and she says, I'm going to say no, Mum, and I'm going to walk off. And I say, but hang on a minute. What are you going to do if another car comes up or, a minibus or whatever and says, but I know your mum and your mum has sent me and I have come to take you to school. And she said, well, I've known all of your friends in Bawtry since I was very small. And if it's none of them, I will not go with them. I will say no. And I will walk on. Okay. So about 2 seconds later, a car pulls up behind us. And it made me jump, again, because she's more confident and savvy than me. She was fine. I was like, because I'm full of stranger danger by this point, and I'm just freaking out. And of course, it's Timothy, isn't it? Driving his parents. And because it's an electric car, it does creep up on you. It makes no noise at all. So there's me, jumping a mile high, and she's absolutely fine. And I'm nearly handbagging the car, and poor old grandma's calling out from the passenger seat in a little Swedish accent, hello, Kate. And I'm having a nervous breakdown, and, Lucy's absolutely fine. So, pray for me in the morning. I think it's going to be a rough one. She'll be fine. She'll sail off to school. But new beginnings and fresh starts and something new. And in my 20-plus years of being a Christian, this is one of the most amazing and mind-blowing things about God. That there is always opportunity for something new. There is always, always an opportunity for new beginnings and a fresh start. And I don't know about you, but that just blows me away anyway. Just the fact that, we all have our struggles, we all have our bad habits, we all have our bad attitudes, we all fail and we all stumble. And God just takes us back every single time. And where we might think, well, you've done it again. I'm a bit fed up of this now. We get fed up of ourselves, don't we? I certainly get fed up of myself. Where we would lose patience and where we would run out of grace, God just never does. God is the God of new beginnings, and it just blows me away. And of course, we know that that's not an excuse and that's not a reason to do what on earth we want to do. It actually gives us more desire to please God and more desire to live for God because of his amazing grace and the opportunity for a new beginning. There is freedom to change for the better. God gives us the power to do that. So this morning, what new beginning do you need in your life? So I'm going to ask you 2 questions this morning, and this is the first question. What is God doing? What is God doing? And again, we can ask this question every day. What does God want to do in my life today? Doesn't matter how old or young we are. Doesn't matter how much of the Bible we know. It doesn't matter how many minutes or hours or days we spend in prayer. What does God want to do in your life? What is God doing? And in the story of Abraham in the Bible, we read of this guy, and he's a very rich and successful man. He lives in a faraway country and he worships a God, another God, not our God, until one day God breaks through into his life and things change forever. And God spoke to him and told him that he needed to go from where he was, from what was familiar, from what was comfortable, and from what he knew, to somewhere totally different, somewhere totally foreign and new to him, a place that God had set for him, a country that God was going to give him. And God also said, and I should use the technical name because we've got Old Testament scholarship in the crowd here, and I'm not very good. Abram, he wasn't Abraham yet, he was actually Abram, because God changed his name. Abram would be the start. God told Abram he would be the start of a new people, a new nation, the people of Israel. His family were going to be the cornerstone, the starting point of a new thing, of a world-changing thing, of a plan of God that had been there from the beginning of time, from before the beginning of time. And the Bible tells us that Abram trusted God and did what God called him to do, even though that was a real step in the dark. It was a new country, it was a new place, it was a different God to the God that he'd worshipped. The whole thing was totally new, totally different. But we read in Genesis, so Abram left as the Lord had told him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. So the only problem with Abram's family being the starting point and the cornerstone of God's master plan for humanity was the fact that Abram and Sarai were too old to have children. Just a minor snag, just a little setback in an otherwise perfectly understandable plan. But isn't that sometimes how God works? Isn't that sometimes how God works? Because then he gets the glory, because it's not all nice and neatly coloured in round the edges. It's messy and it's confusing and it doesn't always make sense. But if God said it and it's what God has promised, then it's going to become reality. So here's the reality and here's what God promised. Even though they weren't able to have children, they'd never had children. It's not like they had kids tucked away somewhere. It really wasn't happening for them at all, not least because they were so old. God was going to make a way so that his plan could come into being. And actually we read further on in the story that when God told them they were going to have a son, they actually laughed. Which I don't really want to do that to God because God is amazing and mighty, but they were very brave. But they laughed because it seemed so ridiculous, because it had never happened. There was no prospect of it happening, and they'd given up. Sometimes we can give up on stuff, can't we? Sometimes we can think, well, God, this hasn't happened. I thought it would. I hope it might. I thought you promised it, and it hasn't, so I give up. It's so easy sometimes to give up. And that's why they laughed, because it just seemed ridiculous. It had gone out of their heads. They'd moved on. But actually, God was saying to them, I've got this world-changing plan, and I'm going to do the miraculous so that it can happen. Isn't it true sometimes that we can reduce God down to the size of our situations and the size of our problems, and we all do it. And sometimes we might feel like laughing when he says something to us that just seems amazing and mind-blowing and improbable. But he is the creator of all things. And if he wants to do it like he does, then that will happen. If he's going to give a child to an elderly couple who've never had kids, that's not a problem for him. That's not difficult. We don't understand. We can't make that happen, but he can. Sometimes things don't work out in the way that we expect. Sometimes we have our plans and they don't work out. And if you're anything like me, where you like to plan, that can be very frustrating. So people laugh at me, but it all works very well. That, you know, at the beginning of every month, I buy all the birthday cards and I buy all the presents. And so people often, because of the Sundays and because I've worked it all out, get handed a birthday present 3 weeks before their birthday because I am so planning and organised and love it so much. But God doesn't always work with the plans that we have. Sometimes he does, but sometimes he doesn't, because he's got a greater plan. And maybe you've got to the point in the year, 3 quarters into 2023, and maybe you're saying to God, well, this wasn't what I expected. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't what I thought it would be. What's going on? Maybe you're at that point. And I'm here to tell you this morning that God not only sees and hears that, but he is with you. And sometimes it's easy to forget that bit as well and think, well, I had all my plans and I had all my things sorted out and it was all very neatly organised. Thank you very much. And it's not how it's supposed to be. Why is that, God? What's going on? And he wants you to know this morning that he hears that, he sees that, and he has a bigger plan. And actually, where we can reduce him down to the size of our problems and our challenges, he is so much bigger than that. For an elderly couple to have a child is really not difficult for God. It really, really isn't. For him to reach into your situation and bring breakthrough is not difficult. But sometimes it is a matter of timing. Total faith. I wrote this down, so I'll read it out because I don't want to forget because it's good. Total faith amidst total unknown. Total faith amidst total unknown. So a few years after Tim and I got married, we were living in Leeds, and we felt that it was right to move from Leeds to Bawtry. I'd got a job teaching at the Bible college. We wanted to be near Tim's parents for babysitting and all of that, even now we're looking after them, but, you know, best laid plans. And we just felt that it was time for a new start. We'd had a great time in Leeds. We'd been part of a church which had been fantastic, a church plant. We'd had a lovely time, but it was just time for a new start. So amazingly, we had a house in Bawtry lined up. There was no rush. It was just going to wait for us, which is brilliant because that doesn't always happen with houses. So we put our house on the market. And we told everybody that we were moving. And it was very emotional, and it was a big change for us. It was a big change for the church because we were quite key. We were quite involved. And then nothing happened. For a year, nothing happened. Few people came to view our house, but nothing. For nearly a whole year. So we got used to having these conversations with people in church, which went something along the lines of, we're really going to miss you, you know, when you go, Tim and Kate. And I'm a bit like, yeah, when that finally happens. Because it took so long. Because we'd made the decision, that was our plan. We put the house on the market. We'd got it all sorted. We were going to move. Why would we not move? We had a house in Bawtry. Why was it not going to happen? And it didn't happen for a year. It didn't happen for a whole year. And as the weeks and months rolled on, we came to realize that it was more about trusting God and trusting God's plan than anything we were going to make happen. And anything, you know, we could have the TV on for ambient noise. We could have the coffee pot going. We could bake bread. If any of you know me very well, I don't think I've ever baked bread since. You know, we could create this lovely environment for somebody to want to buy our house. But actually, until it was God's timescale and God's timing, it wasn't going to happen. Proverbs 3, verses 5 to 6 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths." I don't know about you, but for me, when I first became a Christian, I must remember to go back to the story of the house. Just remind me. My brain's not always there. As a new Christian and as a person who doesn't come from a family of faith and, you know, first generation Christian and all of that, the fact that we can have struggles and delays and frustrations and disappointments in our lives as Christians was real news to me. We were singing this morning about giants. I didn't think you were supposed to have that as a Christian. When I first became a Christian, quite a long time into my journey of faith, I just thought, well, no, because it's all good, isn't it? We make a decision for Jesus and then everything's rosy and we never have any delays, we never have any frustrations, it's never difficult again. There are no giants. That's for the Old Testament, not the New. But actually, that does happen. And sometimes it all goes horribly wrong and you're still imperfectly in the will of God. And actually, it's a lesson and it helps us to grow as a Christ follower and as a person of faith when we have to wait and when things don't go the way that we understand that they should go, the way that we think they should go. So there we were, a year. It took a year. But we got to the point where we thought, okay, this is God's problem now. We've done all we can, and God is going to have to do all that he can do because we can't see any other way round. We've put the telly on, we've baked the bread, we've poured the coffee. It's all been lovely. People have walked round and poked and prodded, and they don't like the swirly ceiling and all the rest of it. It's out of our hands now. It's God's problem. It's God's business. And then one day, this young couple came to view the house. And I remember thinking at the time, I just felt this kind of glimmer of hope. And by that point, you just think, well, let's just see and let's just trust God because I've thought this before and it's not happened. But sure enough, they wanted to buy the house. And they didn't mind the fact that the bathroom was downstairs, which was quite a sticking point in the whole thing. They were going to make it work and they were going to have the house. And finally, after a year, we were going to finally move. Woohoo! As I've said to a very dear friend recently, all it takes is a moment. All it takes is a change in situation. All it takes is for that new job to come on the internet, for that person to walk into your life, a change of situation, a change of circumstance, a change of place, a new person, different person, change of mindset. Just takes one thing for breakthrough to come. And that is not difficult for our God. He is the God who made everything. And sometimes we forget that. We forget that he is the one who brought everything into being, that created the stars in the sky and the land that we stand on. And he is the Lord of time and space. And so if it becomes his problem, if we allow it to become his problem, that's the best place to be. Because he is the one who can sort it out. He is the one who is able to make a way when there doesn't seem to be a way. Another big question for us was what church we'd go to. And I'm a bit on memory lane here, you'll have to excuse me. What church we would go to, and lots of brilliant churches in the area. I mean, this is 15 years ago. And I reeled them all off to Tim, and he sat there very wisely, sipping his cup of tea, as he does. And he said, I think we should go to Langgold. And I was like, oh, okay, that's good. So I'd been here a couple of times. We didn't know anything about it. That was the thing. We'd been a couple of times as Bible college students. He'd been when his dad came to preach. But we didn't know anything about it. But we came here and we felt peace and we felt happy and we felt like we could be part of it. And the rest is history. And I tell you that story as well. I'll stop on memory lane now because we could be here a long time. It's 43 years. But to tell you that story, that we obeyed God and we came. Even though we didn't know, even though a lot of it was uncertain, even though it took a long time for it all to happen, we heard God, we obeyed him, and we did what he asked him. We did what he asked us to do. And he makes a way when you do that. He makes a way. Even though the first time we walked in here, it was really scary and we didn't know anyone and we had to make friends, we felt very welcome. And God made a way. God brought us everything that we needed at that point in time. He brought us a house. He brought us to the right church for the right place to be in. And so this morning, wherever you are, where you're setting out, and maybe it's a big thing and maybe it's a little thing, what is God doing in your life? If it's a new start, if it's the desire and need for a new start, please know this, that he is with you and he makes a way. Even when it's not obvious, even when there's hiccups, even when there's giants, even when you have to walk into somewhere new for the first time and think, gosh, I hope people talk to me. I hope this is going to be okay. God makes it work and God covers over. If only we trust him and only we do what he wants us to do. So my first question was, what is God doing in your life? My second question is, do you have it all worked out? Do you have it all worked out? Are you like me? Are you miles ahead of the game and you're planning 6 months in advance and you don't understand why other people don't do that? And you've got it all sorted out in your head. You've got your plans. You know where you're going. You know what you're doing. And it's great to be like that, but sometimes doesn't always happen how we think. There's a story in the New Testament about a man who seemed to have it all worked out, but that met with God and his life was changed forever. So, meanwhile, Saul was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found anyone there who belonged to the way, whether men or women, he might take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting," he said. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't he the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on his name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" Saul, or as he later became known, Paul, was a changed man after he met with God. What a new beginning. What an incredible new beginning. He was headed down a certain path, a path of study and academia, teaching others about the Jewish faith. He also had this rather nasty little habit of persecuting Christians and hunting them down. The followers of the way, as they're described there. He was on his road. He knew what he was doing. That was his lot in life. That was his plan. That was what he was going to do. He thought he had all the answers. He thought he knew exactly what he was doing. But God had another plan. Sometimes in our lives, God has another plan. So when I'm talking about new beginnings this morning, maybe for you, it's a new start. Maybe it's going off somewhere new. Maybe it's not as big as that, but it's just a fresh start in a fresh way in some area of your life. Maybe for other people here, you're going down a certain route, or you thought you were, and God is asking you to change that route. And God is asking you to go a different way. Maybe that's a career choice. Maybe that's something that you do. Maybe it's just an attitude of your heart. But maybe for some of us this morning, God is saying, you think you know where you're going, but actually, I want you to change your path, and I want you to follow me. He thought he had all the answers, but God met with him and showed him what the point was. Because he had missed the point. He was so far away from the point wasn't even visible to him anymore. He was going in his own wisdom, his own understanding, his own strength. He wasn't factoring God into the equation at all, even though, by the looks of it, he was a very spiritual man. He was a very holy man. He was persecuting all these Christians. He was teaching the Jewish faith. But he didn't have that understanding of God. He hadn't met with God for himself, and he hadn't connected with God. And God met with him in a very dramatic way and showed him what the point of life was, to have a relationship with him, to connect with him, and to follow him. Whatever else you're doing in life or hope to do in life, if you're doing those things, if you are in relationship with God, if you are connected to God and you're following God, you are winning. It doesn't matter how much money you've got in the bank. It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter how you feel about yourself. You are on the right track. You are on the path that God wants you to be on. The other things are other details, but the point, the big point, is life with him. And let's all be open to just being more open to him when he wants to speak to us in that way, when God wants us to have a change of mind, that we think we're doing things a certain way, and actually he wants us to make a change. Maybe it's a change of heart. It was interesting, we were away in Northumberland over the weekend, and I was in the hotel room unpacking because it's just easier to do with one person in the room. And it's a squash in a hotel room with 4 people. I don't know how long we're going to do it, to be honest, especially when one of us is nearly 6 foot. It's not going very well, I don't know. But there I am, unpacking the hotel room, and I've got my worship music on. I'm just having this God moment, and it's just brilliant. And then Tim comes and knocks on the door and kind of says, "Are you nearly ready? You know, we're in the car. We're getting a bit fed up now." And we had a quick conversation. And you need to have people like this in your life. And if it's your spouse, that's great. If, you know, for whatever reason it's not, just have friends, just have leaders, have people in your life that can, on occasion, just say, "Look, love, it needs to be a bit different." And actually, he said to me, bless him, you've got a bit of a poor attitude, actually, Kate. You need to you're going a certain way with how you are over these next few days and how you've been over the last couple of weeks. You need to make a change. You need to make a heart change. You need to have a different attitude. I am as grumpy can be if I let myself be. And I had been as grumpy can be. And thankfully, bless him, he was just calling that out and just saying, this is not God's way for your life. This is not God's best for your life. Please, can you make a change? And it was perfect because I'd been in this atmosphere of worship and I'd had this time with God. So I was able to hear that. Because it can be hard sometimes when somebody says to you, actually, you need to do something a bit different. When God says to you, you're going down this route, but actually, you need to change what you're doing and change your heart. And I needed that time with God just to prepare my grumpy self for the challenge of not being grumpy. And sometimes a new start involves that, a change of attitude, a change of what we do. And it's really hard because we don't like being told that we're wrong. We know what we know, and we think we know what we're doing, but sometimes God wants to say to us, actually, this is the route that you need to take. It might not be a majorly dramatic new start like Abraham, but it's a route that you need to take in terms of your heart and your attitude and how you are. And actually, that's the biggest thing. We can do all the wonderful things in the world. The Bible talks about this in 1 Corinthians 13. But if we don't have the right heart and we don't have the right attitude, it's all rubbish. It's all a total waste of time. We could fill our days with, you know, helping people and doing lots of great things, lots of charitable stuff and making a real difference. But if our heart is not right and our heart is not following God and open to God, we are wasting our time. And that's the challenge to us. To just be open to God and let God be the one that leads us. We think we've got it all stitched up. We think we've got everything organized. But actually, does he want to take us on a new path, on a path that's closer to him, on a path that is better, on a path of a new attitude? Maybe for some of us, it's very easy, if we've been a Christian for a long time, just to get a little bit rusty and dusty and, you know, well, I come to church every week and this is what I do. And, you know, it's just how it is. And I read my Bible and that's all. And actually we forget that God can really meet with us and God can really make a difference in our lives and in our hearts. And I love Denise, and I'm sorry I'm mentioning you, Denise, but your enthusiasm every week. Even when we have the kids' song, she's bopping away. I expect her to be doing this one day, you know, just like hallelujah, like it goes. But it's that enthusiasm. In your new start, in this new season, this new September, maybe it's a change. Maybe you're going to do an Abraham and you're going to go and save the world and you're going to go and do a whole new thing and it's going to be really dramatic and amazing. Fantastic. But maybe it's just getting that new enthusiasm and that new passion again for God. And I challenge myself with this as I'm talking to you. Because for me, I think I've read so much about the Bible and I've read so much of the Bible, I can be very in my head and I can forget to let God into my heart. And is that the challenge for you this morning? Just to get that new passion, that new enthusiasm. And it's not all about feelings. But sometimes we just have to get ourselves passionate and enthusiastic about God again. I was in the, you all know where I go on a Sunday morning before church, one stop for my coffee. And I was smiling to myself as I was using the machine, because it was lovely. You know, when you have a conversation with all the people in the shop, apart from me because I'm not into football, they were having this real banter. The guy behind the counter and this guy carrying a dog and somebody else were having this whole conversation about football. And it was a real like, oh, you know, your defenders weren't very good and da-da-da-da-da. And it was just a really nice conversation to listen to first thing in the morning. But the passion that they have about, 22 men kicking a bag of wind around a pitch. It's a good job Tim's not in the room, otherwise he would not be happy with me saying that. But do you know, the passion that people can have for football and for sport or whatever else goes on in life is great, brilliant. But let's get some of that for God. And it's so easy to be passionate about everything else and just forget the God bit. And I'm not saying don't be passionate about other things, but I'm just saying to you and to me, as we start this new term, as we start in September, maybe it's time to just allow God to get passionate in our hearts again and allow that passion and that enthusiasm for God in our hearts again. We think we're going down the right road, but let's let God into our lives and let's let God lead us in what he wants us to do.